What's up guys, this is your guy High, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build a gaming PC. Don't worry, I have a ton of experience. This is my second build. But seriously, my first build went really well and I really got kind of the fever and I wanted to build another one, so my son was actually interested in gaming. He currently plays on console on Xbox, but he really wanted to try it on the PC with a controller, so we opted to build him a lesser model. And so today I'm going to be building that, and I'll also show you, kind of talk about the parts that I used to build this. So first off, we've got the case, which is the Corsair 275R Airflow. So this is a really good kind of lower end case. It's a good mid-tower case. It had great reviews. I got a great deal on it. I think I got it for about $60 after rebates on Newegg. So I'd highly recommend, if you guys are, regardless of where you're buying your parts, whether it's from Amazon, Newegg, other places, make sure that you check out the sites that give you cash back, like Retail Me Not and Rakuten. So because you can actually get up to 6 to 10% cash back on any of the purchases that you do from those specific sites. So you just go to Rakuten, you go to Retail Me Not, type in the actual the website they're actually going to be purchasing from, Newegg, Best Buy, and it'll activate a code or link and then direct you to those sites. And then you just make your purchase like you normally would, and Retail Me Not or Rakuten will send you basically a check, in 30 days for that 6 to 8%. So if you're building a PC like this, so this one is around $1,000, you would get roughly $60 to $70 back in cash. So it can save you some money. You can apply it to other components. So again, this is a good case for airflow. It's got the ventilated front, top, back, and bottom. This is a white case here with the tempered glass side. We've also, for my motherboard, I chose the MSI B450 Carbon Gaming with Wi-Fi. So this is a good kind of a mid-tier motherboard. I think I got it for about $140 on Newegg. But of course, I'll leave the links to all the different parts in the description field for you guys to kind of check out. So again, the prices will vary based on the supply and demand that's currently out there. This motherboard in particular will support all the 3000 AMD processors out of the box, so there's no kind of BIOS update that you have to do. So it's already ready for it, so that's what I really liked about it. Also, I spent a little extra money on the Wi-Fi, so I definitely recommend that unless you have a Wi-Fi card that you're going to use, or you're just not using Wi-Fi. I always like to have a Wi-Fi connection with my computers, even though I may be plugging that in hardwired with the landline. It's just nice to have. It's just convenient. Also has a little RGB in it, so I wanted to make it a little nicer, the actual motherboard. For the processors, for the graphics card, I chose the EVGA RTX 2060 KO Gaming Ultra. This I think 2060 is the similar one that I have. I have the actual MSI version in my first build, which it does really well. I think this is kind of a good mid-tier graphics card, actually upper mid-tier graphics card for your money. So I paid about, after rebates and everything, probably about $280 for this graphics card. And it will run any of the newest current games well over 140, 150 FPS at the medium settings at 1080p. Of course, it's going to easily run it about over 60, 80 frames per second for if you're running it at the highest ultra settings at 1080p. This can support 1440p gaming as well as go into 4K gaming as well. The processor I chose was the AMD Ryzen 5 3600. So I got this for about a really great deal, probably about $175 on Amazon. This is currently going for about $210 right now. So this is a very popular, very good kind of middle of the road processor as well. And this will easily run any of the current games at the highest settings. For the RAM, I chose the Corsair Vengeance RG Pro 16 gig, 3200 megahertz. So this is a good, solid, fast running RAM. I chose to get the RBG version. It's about $10 or $15 more, but I wanted to go ahead and make that a little nicer for the case, since the processor, the fan, doesn't have RGB. Like for my other build, I had the Ryzen 7 3700X, and it's got the fan that has the RGB. So I wanted to add a little bit of bling to this particular case. For the power supply, I chose the EVGA 500 BQ. So that's just kind of a minimal, at least you want 450 to 500 watts for if you're running parts like this. You can certainly, get a cheaper one. You can get a different model. I paid a little bit more because that's a semi-modular one. So it's going to help me with my cable management. So I'm not going to have a lot of cables, unnecessary cables I have to deal with. And I think that's it. Yes, for the storage, I had the Western Digital Black 500 gigabyte M2 SSD. So I chose this one because this is the fastest on the market under the about the $80 mark under. So I got it for about $65. This has some of the fastest read-write speeds that you would need to kind of start your game, start your operating system. So I went ahead and chose that. But I'm going to go ahead and build the PC. I'm going to leave a link in the description to all of these different parts. Also some additional videos that I used for my first build. So I referenced some YouTubers like J2Cents, TechSource, really great videos out there that will help you with your first build. So I hope you guys like this, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay guys, so the first component we're going to need is the motherboard. So let's go ahead and open that up. Okay, now that we have the motherboard unwrapped, I like to use the box to prop the motherboard up. Let's also remove any kind of protective film on any of the motherboard parts. Okay, in this next step, let's go ahead and install our M.2 SSD drive. Some motherboards will have a heatsink or a heat shield for the M.2 drive. If you don't have one for your motherboard, just skip this step. Holding the M.2 drive from the side or the back, apply a small amount of pressure until the actual hard drive pops into place. Once you've inserted the M.2 drive, use the small screw provided to fasten the M.2 drive in place. Okay, now we're going to install the CPU and CPU fan. Depending on the CPU fan model that you have, you may or may not need to remove these fasteners. Make sure to check in your manual. Next, we're going to install the CPU. Make sure to lift the latch and raise it in an unlock position. Be careful not to touch any of the pins or bend them, as this could damage the CPU. There is a small triangle on the CPU. Make sure to line that triangle up with the triangle in the CPU socket. Gently placing the CPU down, do not apply any pressure. The CPU should just drop into place. Once the CPU is in place, go ahead and latch the arm to lock the CPU in place. Next, we're going to be installing the CPU fan. Most stock CPU fans now have some sort of thermal paste already applied. Make sure to read your manual to see if you need to apply any yourself. If you have a fan like this that's fastened with screws, go ahead and do that now in a crisscross pattern. Next, we're going to install the CPU fan to the CPU fan header at the top of your motherboard. Next, we're going to be installing the RAM. Make sure to read your manual to see which positions you need to install your RAM in. Typically, if you're installing 2 sticks of RAM, you're putting the RAM in position 2 and 4. But again, read your manual to make sure. The RAM can only be installed one way. There's a notch in the middle of the RAM. Make sure to line that up with the notch in the RAM slot. Once you've inserted the RAM, make sure to put pressure on both sides to install the RAM. The RAM should click in place to make sure it's securely fastened. And likewise, go ahead and do that with the additional stick of RAM. In this next step, we're going to get the computer case ready by removing the side panel and installing the I/O shield that came with our motherboard. In this example, since I'm not installing any 3.5-inch hard drives, I'm removing the brackets to allow for more airflow in the case. Now, let's go ahead and install the I/O shield. The I/O shield should pop into place with a little pressure from the inside of the case. Next, we're going to be installing the motherboard in the case. But before we do that, make sure that you have your standoff screws installed. Your case should already have some installed. Make sure the number of standoff screws that you have matches the number of standoff holes within your motherboard. If not, go ahead and install those now. Now we're going to install the motherboard into the case. Make sure the I/O ports line up with the I/O shield in the back of the case. Now we're going to use the small screws to fasten the motherboard in place. Next, we're going to install the power supply. Make sure the fan is facing down when installing. You're going to use 4 screws to fasten the power supply in place. The first cable we're going to connect is a 24-pin cable. Go ahead and route that through the appropriate channel. Make sure the cable is securely fastened to the motherboard, otherwise you'll have trouble powering on your computer. Next, we are going to connect the cable that powers the USB ports in the front of your case to the JUSB 3 header at the bottom right of your motherboard. The next cable to connect is the one labeled audio, which will go into the JAUD1 header. This is to give power to the audio ports at the front of your case. Next, we are going to connect 2 front intake fans to the SysFan headers. The next cables we are going to connect are for the front power, reset button, and any LED lights on your case. These cables will connect to the header labeled JFP1. Make sure to connect these based on the diagram in your manual. It should look similar to this diagram. Next, we're going to connect the rear fan to the SysFan header. The last component we need to install is your GPU or graphics card. We'll start by removing 2 PCI brackets. Depending on your case, you may have to remove the first and second or the second and third brackets. Now we're going to connect the GPU into the PCI slot. Make sure it snaps into place. Then secure it with the screws that you removed earlier. The last thing we need to do is connect the power cable to the GPU. This will be labeled PCIe or VGA. And there you have it, guys, your completed PC build. The next step will be to install Windows or any other operating systems of your choice. I decided to replace the 3 stock fans with 5 RGB fans. My son really liked the RGBs. Thank you guys for watching my video. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.